Hello. This will be part two of the annual Sabbaths in Genesis. And we'll go first to Genesis 18, starting at verse 1 and on down to verse 7. And Yahweh appeared unto him, that is Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent of the door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Yahweh, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened unto the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. It is apparent from the original language that in Genesis 18 that unleavened bread was being served. Abraham instructs Sarah in verse 6, make cakes upon the hearth. That is Strong's number 5692, pronounced as gugah, a cake baked under hot cinders, such as the Orientals are accustomed to make, especially when on a journey or in haste. Gesenius. Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament, copyright 1979, Baker Bookhouse. The word is also used in the following text. Ezekiel 4:12, and thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, and thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. And Exodus 12:39, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry, neither they prepared for themselves any victual. Another Hebrew word associated with the festival of unleavened bread is used in Genesis 18, number 4116, mahar, to hasten, Gesenius. And Abraham hastened, number 4116, into the tent, verse 6. Make ready quickly. Again uses the word mahar, number 4116, in verse 6. And he hasted, number 4116, to dress it, verse 7. The same word mahar is used in reference to Israel leaving Egypt in haste. Exodus 12:33, and the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We be all dead men. Genesis to Deuteronomy, otherwise known as the Torah or Law, was originally 1 volume or scroll, and Moses was the author, except for a few verses dealing with his death, of course, and perhaps he is more of an inspired compiler of the Genesis portion from pre-deluge and patriarchal writings passed down to him. Now, since Moses is a common writer of Abraham's visitation at Mamre, and the exodus of Israel from Egypt, wouldn't it be logical that the repetition of a same word in the two accounts might be a clue that the two events are related? Perhaps implying that Genesis 17:18 and Exodus 12 may be referring to the same season of the year, namely the days of unleavened bread. This in spite of the fact that Genesis never names the festivals, it only announces their existence. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, it is not stated in Genesis to eat unleavened bread during what later became the Passover week, or days of unleavened bread, but it certainly was here foreshadowed by making it in haste. The two angels that appeared to Abraham at Mamre ate unleavened bread in Sodom that evening. Going on to Genesis 19, verses 1 to 3. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And they pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. The Hebrew word used here is Strong's number 4682, matzah. It's spelled M-A-T-S -T-Z-A-H, and defined by Gesenius as unleavened bread, such as is used at the Passover, opposed to leavened bread. We've heard this before about talking about the matzah, that is sold and ate for unleavened bread. And of course, many of us, go out and buy it ourselves. Here again, unleavened bread is eaten during the holy day season. Whether this was commanded or foreshadowed is again unclear, but it is clear that it is the time of year that Abraham and his household recognized as a spring festival, i.e., the time of life. Spring is the time of life, when it all becomes green, and maybe some animals more are born, and or breeding at that time. And the word matzah also appears in the following text. Exodus 12:8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, matzah, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. And Leviticus 23:6. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, matzah. Lot, despite being a true worshiper of Yahweh God, did not have the same priorities as Abraham. He was willing to compromise to live a life of comparative ease and luxury in Sodom. Apparently Lot was single and was willing to take a wife from Sodom and raise a family in that environment, a decision that would torment him greatly. Genesis 13:7 through 13. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. And Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourselves, I pray you, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the Garden of Eden, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves, the one from the other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before Yahweh exceedingly. We are admonished not to have our minds centered on this life, but on the kingdom of heaven. And that is where Lot was wrong. And of course, we have in Galatians, it says that, Abraham was looking towards another city, the city that comes from heaven, the New Jerusalem. And John 2:15 and 6, 1 John 2:15 and 16. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. Abram, or afterwards Abraham, was more spiritually mature than Lot, and detested the sins of Sodom to such an extent that he rejected their riches. Genesis 14:21-23. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto Yahweh, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread, even to a shoe latchet, from thee, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou should say, I have made Abram rich. And of course, the reason what this had just previously, there had been a battle, and of course, Sodom, surprisingly enough, was an ally with Abraham and his company at the time. And after the battle, Abraham meets Melchizedek. And why he had just said to the king of Sodom that he had lifted up his hand to Yahweh, taken an oath that he would not take any possessions or any reward from the king of Sodom, is because he had this Melchizedek he had encountered was God himself, was the person of the Godhead who would become Jesus Christ, sort of a pre-incarnate Christ, where he appears in the Old Testament before he becomes the Jesus Christ, the Messiah, or Yeshua HaMashiach. He was the Logos, the Word that was with the Father in the beginning. And continuing on, Sodom, like Egypt, symbolizes sin, or the leaven that we are to remove from our lives. Revelation 11 and verse 8, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. This is discussing of the two witnesses. And the sins of Sodom were undoubtedly many, but two stand out in Scripture. A. Abominable sex practices. The men of Sodom were bisexual and more inclined towards homosexual activity than heterosexual. Leviticus 18:22. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. And continuing in the 19th chapter of Genesis, verses 4 through 10. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut the door. Another characteristic of, or sinful trait of Sodom was Sodom was uncharitable, for it had apparently had plenty to eat, while neighboring cities and tribes were having a famine. Ezekiel 16 and verse 49 and 50. Behold, this was iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. And going on to Genesis 12 through 10. And he removed from thence into a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, half in Bethel on the west, and high on the east. And there he built an altar unto Yahweh, and called upon the name of Yahweh. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. So this is the famine that Ezekiel had been alluding to in chapter 16. Covetousness was Lot's downfall. First Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they had erred from the faith, and pierced themselves with many sorrows. 2 Peter 2:5. and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Verse 6, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah unto ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making an example unto those that after should live ungodly. And verses 7 through 9, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. The Lord knowing how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. Lot's wife was probably a native of Sodom, and longed for her past. Therefore, as she saw friends and possibly family perishing, Luke 17 and verses 28 to 32. Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day he which shall be upon the housetop, and his stuff in the house, let him not come to take it away, and he that is in the field, let him not likewise return back. Remember Lot's wife. Genesis 19:17. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, and they said, Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thee in the plain, except escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And verse 26. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Lot's daughter survived and brought some of Sodom's leaven, or sin, with them, for they were so desirous of progeny that they committed an incestuous rape of their father by getting him drunk. Genesis 19:34 to 38. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Benami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 9. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom, they hide it not. Woe unto their souls, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Psalm 83:8. Asher is also joined with them. They've hope in the children of Lot. The children of Lot are apparently the Jordanians and so-called Palestinians of today. So, since Lot's wife and children were of Sodom, it would not be unfair to characterize them as what remains of Sodom's leaven today. Salvation, however, is offered without respect of persons. Thank you for listening.